Good afternoon. Welcome to the City of Tampa's 133rd birthday celebration. It's all virtual, of course. Tampa became a city on July 15, 1887, and this week we are celebrating 133 years of history. My name is Shirley Fox Nose, and I am Tampa's City Clerk. I am here today with Jennifer Dietz, our Archives and Records Manager, and Allison Smith, our Digitization Supervisor, and they will tell you more about Archives Awareness Week and introduce our special guests. Jennifer?
Good afternoon. Welcome to our first ever virtual Archives Awareness Week. This is the first event that we have done a full week of online programs and exhibits. And of course, we've done this because of the pandemic, but we are happy to be able to provide with you a great week of programs. And you can access that by the link, which is on the screen right now, tampagov.net/AAW. That's how you'll be able to find everything. And when you go to that link, I just want to show you what it's going to look like. Oh, the PowerPoint is not working. Okay. We have a little bit of a glitch, not too bad. We're just going to try to figure out where we can fix the PowerPoint to show you the programs. I don't know why. Do we have to go up there maybe? No. All right. Well, we knew something was going to happen with technology. We just didn't know what it was going to be. So you can just hang on for a second. We will show the PowerPoint. Yay! Thanks, Tom. Okay, so as I mentioned, it's Archives Awareness Week, and this is the proclamation from Mayor Castor proclaiming it to be Archives Awareness Week. And then this is what I wanted to talk to you about really quickly. This is how you're going to find all of our online programs and exhibits with our Archives Awareness Week partners. And this year we are happy to partner with the Henry B. Plant Museum, the Tampa Firefighter Museum, the Ybor City Museum, USF Libraries, the Tampa Museum of Art, the Tampa Bay History Center, Tampa Historical Society, and the Tampa Hillsborough County Public Library. And this is a screenshot of what it's going to look like when you go to our main page, and you can click on any one of those links to get to partners pages. And there you can find a great list of programs. You can also see things like our booklet, our Tampa in 1920 booklet that we produced, and there's an article in there by the Honorable E.J. Salsinas, who we'll be hearing from soon, and also some different articles on what Tampa was like 100 years ago. Also, if you click on our link, you will be able to find a Black History walking tour featuring Fred Hearns, which is fantastic. And our partner groups have some wonderful videos online as well. So now I would like to introduce Allison Smith, our Digitization Supervisor, and she will be introducing our special guests today.
Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Allison Smith, and I am the Digitization Supervisor for the City of Tampa. And I'm here to introduce Andy Hughes. He is the author of The Columbia Restaurant, celebrating a century of history, culture, and cuisine. He is a librarian with the University of South Florida's Special Collection Department, and he lectures across the state about Florida history and cuisine. We also have joining us today the Honorable E.J. Salsinas. He is a native of Tampa and a career state and federal prosecuting attorney with a legal career spanning more than 55 years, including 16 years as the elected state prosecuting attorney and serving more than 14 years on Florida's 2nd District Court. He has 2 academic degrees, including his law degree, as well as 2 honorary doctorate degrees. He is a recognized local historian and has provided documentary programs on Tampa history seen on City of Tampa television and YouTube titled Tampa Untold Stories.
Okay, so this is Tampa Then and Now, and I'm going to open up the discussion by talking about Andy's book. As Allison mentioned, this is a screenshot of Andy's bio, and I won't read it again since she just did that, but we are going to talk to Andy today about his book, and also then with EJ, and this is the bio that Allison just read as well. But what we're going to start with today is Andy's book, which I've got here, and it's a really great book. You did a great job with this, Andy. It was a lot of fun to read. It's a lot different than other accounts of Tampa that are out there. It really focuses on some unique aspects and tells stories that you don't always get to hear. And I had a really fun time reading it because of that, because it has so many fun things that, like, I was always looking back in the footnotes to see where the source was, because some of your stories are so crazy you just wouldn't believe they would happen, but they did. And we would like to just ask you some questions about it, maybe just have kind of a fun time discussing what went into writing your book. So what inspired the book? What made you want to write a history of Tampa through the food and beverage industry? I mean, that's a lot of what it focuses on, and just maybe.
I think Tampa itself, I mean, was the biggest inspiration of that, and Gary Mormino, who I had kind of met early in my studies at USF. So he really, his example, looking at social history and stuff, I just was kind of inspired me. But also Tampa itself, I had studied lots of other things, but I just kept coming back to Tampa just because it had such an interesting history, kind of a mystique. I was born in Chicago and grew up in Clearwater, which wasn't nearly as interesting as Tampa when I moved to Tampa, at least the history. So I think that was the first one. And then when I wanted to do something about Tampa, I knew I wanted to write about it. I just wanted to take a different approach. A lot of people, I was in a Southern history class, and a lot of people were doing what I consider kind of obvious things. And I think I've mentioned before just how much I like to kind of use food and culture as a sort of a Trojan horse. Everyone thinks that they're learning about food, but they're also learning about all these other issues that people consider even more important today. So.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I will say that it's a lot of fun to read it. And I know Allison has some questions too, so let me turn it over to her really quick.
I just got one right now. In writing the book, what did you learn about Tampa that you hadn't known before?
Well, pretty much everything, because I didn't know anything, going in when I was first sort of struck with how interesting Tampa was. My mind was a blank slate. So in a lot of ways, I wrote this book just not with any, a lot of people go in with a thesis in mind or like a question. And really for me, it was just, this is like a historian's buffet plate. After he's gone through the buffet, he can't go through another time. So I picked out what I considered all the best little things, at least for me, that I considered interesting. So it'd be hard to picture one aspect, but I guess just how lawless it was in the early days, and that there would be different factions fighting over power, but neither one of them was really clean side, I would say. So, yeah, a lot of these stories would be hard pressed to find a good guy or a clear cut bad guy. Everyone sort of grasping for their own self interest.
Jennifer has a question.
Okay, so as I mentioned, like one of my favorite things in reading this was that you focus on a lot of things that are not always told about Tampa, like the immigrant population. You talk a lot about the civil rights era, and I was wondering, what are your thoughts on diversity in Tampa and how different cultures have really contributed to its legacy?
Right. Yeah, that's really important. I think the Cuban element is really just vital in Tampa, especially, we tend to think of Ybor City as sort of being equal between Spanish and Italians and Cubans, and that's how it played out over time. But I think if you go back to, say, 100 years ago, the turn of the century, Cuba, really, the Cubans here set the tone, I think, for the culture. So just like if an outsider were to move here, say an Italian would have to learn to speak Spanish to survive in Ybor City, they'd also probably end up eating Cuban bread as well. So, I think that's one of the things. I think the Cuban presence is often undersung, but yeah, it's so important. And also just that we didn't have districts, like Chicago is a great example of having like, you might have a small area, just a block for Bohemians. It could get that localized as far as the immigrant population. Whereas here in Ybor City, everyone lived close, very close together in these casitas, these shotgun shacks. And, I think that the thing that breaks down barriers faster than anything else is smelling your neighbor's cooking. So I think that, and EJ certainly he can make a map of West Tampa just based on the smells that he smelled as a child. So I think that's a big part of it, is when you have people living together close, before people even start, say, intermarrying between ethnic groups, the food leads the way. So I think that the casitas and people living together is broke down a lot of barriers a lot faster than people were living apart.
And you think that influence is still felt in Tampa today?
Absolutely, right. You might not feel it in Brandon, but if you go to West Tampa, you can feel it anytime you want. Yeah, there's certainly some remnants of that culture, even if the kind of the labor culture isn't here anymore. A lot of the food and recreation still is.
Okay, Allison?
When you were compiling the stories in the book, were there any that stood out to you as being the most unique to Tampa? Things that would not have happened in any other place?
That's a good question. See, one thing that I've heard that was interesting, someone said about Tampa before, was like, any kind of national story that happened also kind of manifested itself here. So what I found interesting was that, so like for the Spanish-American War, for example, I mean, I knew that troops had passed through here, but I didn't know that kind of a misunderstanding that happened here in Tampa led to the canned, it was like a canned beef scandal, that this canned beef that they were, serving to the soldiers, not only was it not palatable, it wasn't edible. So I had no idea that, there's this kind of charlatan meat dealer came down and was trying to show off this technique. And anyway, and then a general saw it and thought, that's the beef that the soldiers were consuming. You have to read the book to see the exact incident, but there are so many like that. But I think as far as ones being played out, I think the Judge Leo Stalnaker, just one of the great stories in there. I devote a lot of time to it in the Prohibition chapter because I think it is so kind of illustrative of Tampa. Because here's a guy who was really trying to clean up Tampa as a judge, and Tampa seems to be very resistant to that process. But also just that he's an over-the-top character who is trying to do good, but he's in league with the Ku Klux Klan, things like that. So I find Prohibition interesting because two very intemperate forces were fighting over Tampa at the time. One that was behind personal liberty but crime, and the other one that was behind virtue but with a heavy dose of racism as well. But what I find interesting and so Tampa about that story is that, I recently met Anthony Scaglione, who is a descendant, who's part of the family of Stalnaker. So all of Stalnaker's descendants, I think, now have Latin surnames. And, so not only was Stalnaker, hostile towards African Americans, but towards immigrants as well. He really thought the immigrants were responsible for the uptick in crime and everything else during Prohibition. So, in a way, his family is the story of Tampa. Here's a guy who, he wouldn't normally have associated with these people, but it's all family now. So now that family has two great stories to tell, right? So I think that's a good example. But there's so many; it's really hard to.
Oh, definitely. Okay. Jennifer?
No, you're right. That is a great story that I really enjoyed in the book. And also the Staunacker house, I believe, is the oldest house in Tampa, the one that just got moved. So there's a lot of stories linked to that man in particular. It's really interesting. I did want to give a shout out to let people know where they can buy your book. I got mine from University Press of Florida. I don't know if you have any other information on where they should find this.
Yeah, University Press of Florida, that's UPF.com, I believe, but it's also on Amazon. It should be available wherever you get books. Really.
Very good. And I would like to also bring EJ into the discussion, since EJ is mentioned in your acknowledgments at the beginning, and see if EJ has anything he'd like to say about the book or ask any questions.
Yes, I was fascinated because growing up in Tampa, I used to take my girlfriend over to Barkey's so that we could not only have a nice meal, but we could see all the planes landing and taking off. And I learned quite a bit about the Barkey family. But I was also fascinated with all of the intrigue he gave us about prohibition and all the speakeasies. Apparently, Tampa didn't lack any booze during the prohibition. This was a wet place, not a dry place.
Mm-hmm.
And Andy, I also read in detail about Las Novedades. They have a collection of Goya paintings that were brought in 1950 and put up at least 8 or 10 of those Goya masterpieces on tile. Do you know if those pieces have been preserved?
Yes, yeah, they're still in the building as far as I know. Yeah, they're hand painted El Goya tile. And so, like I mentioned in the chapter, it's the last chapter is all about Las Navidades and when it closes, and it's in the midst of urban renewal. And then also what replaced it was the El Goya Lounge. So that was kind of a gay burlesque that was, the name was inspired by those tiles. So as far as I know, they're still there and the building's being renovated.
Well, I know that they're doing a major renovation that is supposed to open up around September 1. But I sure hope that those paintings are on display, because you don't have to go to the museums of Madrid or Paris to see some great masterpieces by one of Spain's great artists, Goya.
Right.
My compliments. I enjoyed your book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, when you say inspiration about the book, without archives, without sources, you couldn't tell any story. So I think it's an important connection to what we're talking about now. You know, the city of Tampa has some great digitized stuff that I was able to use, and particularly the meeting minutes of city council, and then, of course, where I work at USF, you know, we've got some great records in the Stelnacker. There's a scrapbook in addition to a bunch of civil rights papers. So yeah, a lot of this research was done between USF and the archives, in the city of Tampa. So I think that's an important thing to bring up too. Without these things being preserved, yeah, we would just be telling, you know, folks tales.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And I'd like to turn it back over to Shirley, who has a few things to say.
Hi, Andy. I wanted to ask a question about what have you always wanted to write about and haven't yet?
Oh man. You know, I've always had a love affair with Chinsegan Hill near Brooksville. And for a long time, I wanted to write about that. Now the History Center is helping to interpret that site, which is really exciting. So that's one, you know, because that goes into the kind of the older period of Florida. You know, with Tampa, I like to just pick up in 1885, but that would have an opportunity to go back. But there's a lot of things, you know, particularly about food. This book originally was going to have a whole big chapter about food in it. And I wrote so much, I had to cut a lot of stuff out. So there's not the food and the recipes and the stuff that I had planned originally, for a number of different reasons. But that is one I'm going to have to get back to, because I still have a major love affair with Tampa's food, and especially the Cuban aspects. So I'll have to get back to that someday. And the other thing I really wanted to do is actually work with people who have old recipes and just sort of compile them. I don't care if the only difference is, a half a cup of this or that. I'm really interested in the minor details of cooking. So, and that goes across the whole spectrum. I'm really interested in, the Southern food here, the soul food, the immigrant food. So I really think that a community cookbook type of project, I think would be really exciting.
Okay, so that's your next book?
We'll see. I don't know. It all depends. Yeah, we'll see. I have stuff in the hopper though. It's coming.
Okay, all right. Turn it back over. Okay, Jennifer, thank you.
Well, that sounds great. I would definitely get the cookbook to go with this book. I bet there's a lot of great recipes in there. So I would like to remind everybody again that they can find Andy Hughes's book, From Saloons to Steakhouses in the Country of Florida, either at the University of Press of Florida's website or on Amazon.com. And what I'm going to do now is introduce the Honorable E.J. Salsinas, and then he's going to be talking about a couple of topics today. He's going to be talking about the 100-year anniversary of the death of West Tampa police officer Juan Dallas, and then he's also going to be talking about the current present-day pandemic compared to what we went through in 1918 with the Spanish flu. And then after that, we'll have an open discussion with Andy and EJ for any other questions that come up from EJ's topics. So I would like to now switch gears over to history repeating itself, comparing the 1918-1919 influenza epidemic to the 2020 COVID pandemic. But I believe, EJ, before that, you wanted to talk about Juan Dallas, correct? I think our PowerPoint's ahead of itself. Does that look better?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Oh, it's moving on its own. That's why we're out of order here. For some reason, it was moving on its own.
We are looking at the photograph. In fact, the last photograph taken of West Tampa police officer Juan or John Nales. He was a 25-year-old policeman who was serving on the West Tampa Police Department together with his brother Lawrence, when on July the 18th, 1920, we're coming right to the centennial of that tragic event, he was killed here in the streets of West Tampa. Unfortunately, he died a few hours later at the Gordon Keller Memorial Hospital on North Boulevard, and the assailant was pursued, but he got away. And there was, unfortunately, a widow left behind with a little girl and also pregnant. And John Nales' son, John Nales Jr., was born 6 months after his father had been assassinated here in the line of duty. And then the boy of the police officer went on to serve the country in the Second World War. Then he came back to West Tampa, became a very active community leader in the West Tampa Optimist Club, the West Tampa Chamber. And then he was given the 1955 Outstanding Citizen of West Tampa Award. And so on this coming Friday, the Tampa Police Department will be having a memorial service at 11:30 right in front of the Tampa Police Department, and family members like Dorothy and Dennis Nales, the granddaughter and grandson of this deceased officer, will be there, as there will be other family members and a lot of West Tampa Optimist Club and West Tampa Chamber members. So it'll be a wonderful memorial to this local hero who was killed in the line of duty 100 years ago. And we invite the public to come join us at the memorial service next Friday at 11:30.
Thank you. Thank you. That is great information. And I had one more picture to share of the Nullis brothers. And this is
In this picture that you're now showing, sitting down to the chief of police, who is sitting down in the center, to his left is the officer that was killed, John Nullis, and to the right of the chief of police is Lawrence Nullis, who the brother that survived and then served with the Tampa Fire Department for many years, retiring from the Tampa Fire Department. That's quite a historic picture because that was the West Tampa Police Department that existed from 1895 to 1925, a 30-year existence when the city of Tampa annexed West Tampa into the city of Tampa. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Oh, sure, sure. Did you want to switch to the pandemic topic now? Should I put that up on the screen?
I want to now go into the pandemic if I can.
Very good. Okay.
Sales. No sales.
It's
Okay.
so this is the first slide, the history repeating itself, comparing the 1918 to 1919 influenza epidemic to the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. And these are some old ads that we found showing what was going on in 1918 with the kind of things they were advertising in the paper.
That was a very, very dramatic time in all of the world, not just in Tampa or the United States. More people died as a result of that influenza, as it was called then, than died during the First World War. So it tells you that that silent killer has to be watched, and we are experiencing a repeat performance in what we now call the COVID-19. I'd like to tell you that 100 years ago, penicillin and antibiotics did not exist. There were no vaccines or inoculations. The medicinal chemistry and pharmaceutical research laboratories were not anywhere like they are today. But an international epidemic was taking over the world, an invisible enemy, and it became a global infection. When that happened, the scientists no longer called it an infection or some other type of epidemic. They referred to it as a pandemic, as we are now hearing every day in the news. A pandemic is a worldwide devastating infection that is killing a lot of people. And here in 2020, we are now almost seeing a repeat of what we did not know then to be a very, very dangerous virus. As I said, penicillin had yet to be invented. Lately, we have been hearing students going home, college students being told, do your work online, and a lot of employees being sent home to do their work online or being done virtually. So even graduations have been canceled. Some are now being rescheduled, but other graduations have occurred on television, on virtue or Zoom. Cultural institutions like our local museums have closed. Beaches have been closed. Public parks have been closed. Travel has been limited. Cruises, tours, and airline schedules have been canceled or are being delayed for future rescheduling. Our gyms, our stadiums, our clubhouses, our temples, our churches, our synagogues have also been closed, and elective surgeries are being postponed. Even famous Las Vegas has had to shut down to open up at some later day. We have to pay attention to what we're being told to take care and stay away, stay home. Physicians, nurses, and hospital personnel are already overworked and they're running out of beds, and there won't be enough mechanical ventilators. So we must pay close attention, but I want to tell you that 100 years ago, we were having so many people dying in Tampa that they ran out of coffins. Then the bodies were accumulating, and there was even talk that we were going to have to do mass graves. Fortunately, in Tampa, that did not occur. But in an interview of an old funeral director, he remembered that during the influenza of the 1919-20s, there were so many bodies that they would say, look, just put the body on the porch and we will eventually come by and pick it up because we can't keep up. There's so many people that are dying. That was happening not just in Tampa, but all over the United States. So many people were dying. Or even our mortality rate changed. That is the life expectancy changed. In 1917, the life expectancy in the United States was 51 years of age. And then in 1918 and 1919, it dropped to 39 years of age. As we speak, right now, today, the news media is announcing that there are 12,934,317 cases worldwide, with 569,697 deaths. And in the United States, we already have more than 3,300 cases and more than 135,205 deaths. And then as we look to Florida statistics, this past weekend, we broke the record of having the most cases in a single day. Today, we have 12,000 new cases, which bring Florida's reported total cases, new cases, to 282,435. Florida hospitals are bursting at the seam. The United States has the most reported cases. And this past weekend, it was announced that the South Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward region is now the epicenter of the epidemic. Dr. Anthony Fauci has warned us that we are still knee-deep in the first wave. New cases are surging in 32 of our 50 states. Instead of the numbers growing as we add numbers, we're having to multiply these numbers. Just this 4th of July weekend, the national networks reported we're having about 70,000 virus infections per month. The numbers of the new cases are skyrocketing. We are praying that our death rates go down, though we can expect upward spikes. Again, the mortality table is going to have to change with all of the deaths that we are experiencing. In Tampa, as I said, there's already a shortage of beds, and elective surgery again is being postponed. In these last 5 months, we have learned new phrases and new words that have become part of our daily vocabulary: confinement, quarantine, house arrest, homebound, lockdown, stay home. 100 years ago, as the First World War ended and the world felt the after effects of the war, another enemy was striking throughout the world without warning in a series of waves. Even our transport ships and our trains bringing our doughboys back home after the war became floating coffins. Here in our nation, we counted our losses and found that we had lost about 116,000 dead soldiers, Marines, and sailors, and another 320,000 had been sick. And when they started analyzing why were they sick, they determined that this was all part of that influenza. Of the 116,516 that died, 63,114 had died from the flu epidemic, compared to 53,402 that had actually died in combat. So when they alert us that this is a serious illness, it was a serious illness then, 100 years ago, and the same thing is happening today. Perhaps this pandemic is even a worse killer than before, and it's spreading throughout all of the continents. So the Floridians must be very alert, because right now, this epidemic, 100 years after the so-called flu epidemic, is worse than before. If they ran out of coffins 100 years ago, we might be very, very mindful that we must do everything we can to curtail the amount of deaths that are occurring because of this COVID-19. In the city of Tampa in 1920, the city of Tampa established the Tampa Health Department and organized teams of local and state health officers who conducted house to house surveys in the city to see how bad off the situation was here in Tampa. Some never recovered. Some had to bury their loved ones as best they could, because like today, they couldn't have the normal funeral masses, funeral services, and they were having to bury their own in a private matter, as we are now doing, and we're seeing more cremations than ever before. Even in Tampa, one of our former members of city council, Nuncio DiMaggio, very popular political figure in Ybor City, died as a result of the epidemic, and he died December 19, 1918. So here we are in this unfolding crisis, desperately looking to our laboratories to come up with a cure, but also a lasting inoculation in order to quickly build our immunities to defeat this invisible pandemic monster. So today we're asking ourselves, are we destined to write another chapter in tragedy called COVID-19? May God bless our homeland forever. Thank you.
Thank you, EJ. That is just some lot to think about, and it really brings home the point of how serious this is right now. And I had this slide on the screen while you were talking, and even from just 4 days ago, it's gone up. The numbers have gone up so much, because when I put this together and took this off the website, this is still quite a bit less than what we're seeing today, because we had such high numbers over the weekend. So it really gives us a lot to think about. I know Allison did research on the health department in 1920, and we featured that in her booklet. So I'm going to bring her back up in case you had anything you all wanted to talk about as far as that.
Hello, EJ.
EJ. Andy Hughes. Se veía. Y tú no.
What'd you find, Allison?
I found out that actually the health department wasn't created till 1923, but Tampa was building up to a localized health department. Pretty much the state was running it at the time, and because of the influenza pandemic and loss of funding and staff keep up, things like that, they've decided to make the decision to have cities and towns around Florida become more autonomous and deal with more localized health issues. So it was really an interesting article to research, and Dr. Wall, who was the 16th mayor of Tampa, it was interesting to read about him, because he was a real progressive with medical, like the Florida Medical Association, and he was the first person to kind of put it together about yellow fever and mosquitoes, even though it was still not looked, it wasn't still accepted, but they credit him with that now, with the discovery of that. So it was really interesting to read about it.
Allison, let me share with you. Can you hear me, Allison?
Yes, I can.
The city of Tampa was realizing how many people were getting sick, and we needed some type of public health. Up to that point, there had only been private health, but more and more, the nation and the state and the local municipalities were starting to worry and saying, we need to have some type of public health code. And the city of Tampa, as well as the city of West Tampa, enacted city codes, but they came like in 1915, 1916, 1917, but they were not funded. As a result, yes, you had a health code on the books,
Yes.
but there was no appropriation. Then they realized we've got to man these code enforcements, and that's where we started having more physicians, more registered nurses, more people that were trained in medicine, but looking at it not just from a private individual, but from a public position, because we've got to take care of the community. So your research was on target, and eventually the city and the county merged with the state so that we now have ample public health resources and money from the legislature and the city and the county.
Well, that's interesting too, because I'm almost certain that, that public health, that 1915 thing you mentioned, had a lot more to do with yellow fever, because no one knew the influenza was coming at the time. But yellow fever was one of those things that just constantly hit different parts of the state, and then you'd have to, quarantine a whole city if it became sick. So,
absolutely, yellow fever was a killer, especially during the construction of the Panama Canal and during the Spanish-American War. And Walter Reed, when he went to Cuba, discovered that a physician called Carlos Finley had come up with the theory and had documented that it was all coming from the mosquito. So yellow fever was a major, major killer. even before the so-called influenza.
Andy Hughes.
Definitely. And it was really interesting. Other research that I found was they were starting food health safety. They were putting those into place also, like at the state fair. And they were really concerned about milk consumption and the pasteurization of it and for the safety of the citizens of Tampa. So there was really a lot of interesting discussions and issues that they were tackling at the time. And also just private citizens and cleaning up their yards and things like that, and putting those ordinances in place. So it all kind of combined itself into this, you know, great public health concern that they wanted to establish. So it was a lot of little things that came into play that really pushed it forward.
Some study.
Well, it's interesting too that the, you know, one thing I found was that the people here were very resistant to pasteurization. We had a lot of Italians here who, you know, had dairy farms, smaller dairy farms to the east in Ybor City and elsewhere. And they were being forced to pasteurize all their product before it was sold. And this was a big inconvenience, and you don't get the same types of cheeses and flavors with pasteurized milk. So it's safer, but there is a sacrifice there. And a lot of Italians, for example, were not ready to make that sacrifice. So it wasn't just, you know, wine and homemade liquor that was being kept from prying guys. It was also unpasteurized milk.
Yes, that I was reading about that. It was really interesting. So yeah, but yeah, I could see how it can take the taste away and everything, and just it would change up the chemistry of it. So.
Well, and also it will
Go
probably.
ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, DJ.
I just wanted to tell you that further complicating what you've just discussed is that the Panama Canal opened up just about that time, and Tampa is the closest port to the Panama Canal in the United States, of course. And as a result, we had a lot of international shipping coming and going because now not only the Atlantic was available, but the Pacific was available. And
Yeah.
also not only came a lot of booze on those ships, but also a lot of other international infections that our people have never been exposed to. So we had a combination of a lot of booze and a lot of infection going on.
Oh yes, definitely. And Andy, what were you gonna say? Were you gonna add to it?
It probably ran away from me, so it's all right.
Okay. So, okay, sure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all so much. Your talks have both been so interesting. It's always great talking with both of you and learning more about Tampa's history. I just want to take it back to our Archives Awareness Week page to let people know that this is the first day of Archives Awareness Week. So we'll be having a lot of great programs this week, and that you can check out and learn more in our booklet, which is online. Actually, I'm not holding it. There we go. At the Tampa 1920 booklet. And you can find that online. There's an article by EJ in there. And of course, if you want to check out Andy's book, you can purchase Andy's book, which is also online. I think the public libraries have it too, maybe, Andy, I'm not sure. But it's out there. So that those are two great things to check out. And you can go to our website, which is tampagov.net/AAW to see what everyone's doing this week. EJ also has a TV program called Untold Stories that I wanted to mention that you can either watch by going to the website or YouTube City of Tampa. It's youtube.com/City of Tampa. And it airs on CTTV on channel 15 on Frontier or channel 640 on Spectrum on Sundays at 3:30, Tuesdays at 8 a.m., and Thursdays at 10 p.m. So Sundays at 3:30 p.m., Tuesdays at 8 a.m., and Thursdays at 10 p.m., and Fridays at 8 p.m. on CTTV. So you can check out EJ's program there or online on our YouTube channel. And I will turn it back over to Shirley, but thank you both so much. It was really, really great talks today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Jennifer and Allison. Y'all did a great job with the book. And you have that booklet? This is a great booklet. It's a collector's item too, because things are happening today that happened about 100 years ago. So be sure to get this. Thank you. There will be other great history programs during Archives Awareness Week throughout Tampa, and we hope to see you there, in many cases virtually. Also, again, happy birthday to our fabulous city. Thank you for joining us virtually, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again. Thank you, EJ, and thank you, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Shirley.